advice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't run.
Howdy, Rob.
Happy day of the unconquered sun, return of the
Sol Invictus, Rob.
That's right. It's not actually the Feast of Sol Invictus. It would be really cool if we brought that back, and instead of calling it Daylight Savings Time, we just called this the renewed Feast of Sol Invictus. Anyway, it's Daylight Savings Time. So I'm very tired and discombobulated. As
long as we don't have to sacrifice any cute animals, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, no, we'll leave that behind. Hello, everyone. This is Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob. And we got a smorgasbord, a medley, a roundup of things. A lot of stuff has happened. We're going to answer some letters. We're going to talk about some goings on. But what's first on the docket, Matt?
Rob, I just wanted to say I hope your games are going well. Hope everyone is having fun. We haven't checked in on each other's games
That's actually
in a while.
A good point.
Thought.
How are your games going? How are your games going, Matt? I'll tell you about mine. But
they're going great. I mean, there's nothing to look forward to at school most days for my students other than D&D. So other than taking a detour to explain to them why Marvel films are mostly trash and that there are other cinema, I play D&D during lunch every day. It's great.
That's great.
Everyone seems to be in the zone now.
That's awesome.
It takes a couple months, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
My game is going great. As I think I mentioned, I was running players through Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and I made the mistake of teasing a dungeon elsewhere in the region, and despite my best efforts to keep them on track for the first part of Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I've already forgotten the one with the haunted house where it's actually a bunch of smugglers in a cave. They know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, which is stopping the smugglers, but they completely ignored that and went after this dungeon because they had a few days and they were like, let's go to the dungeon. And so I had to basically wing it. And so now they're running through Sunless Citadel while they delve into an undiscovered castle dungeon complex because
if you need to grab a dungeon out of your back pocket, you could do worse than Sunless Citadel. It's a great dungeon.
So it was a little dicey, but it's been fun. They managed to not get wiped by some of the very surprisingly difficult encounters in Sunless Citadel. I think they're about to wrap that up, and then they can go back to high seas adventures. I think they're really excited to get a ship, and I may have to make some adjustments. I'm wondering also if I may end up. Candlekeep comes out in a couple days, and I may see if I can stitch together another one of those adventures.
We are super excited for this one, and I feel like we're going to spend a lot of episodes going through it because, there's, 17 adventures? And,
there's a lot, yeah. I'm excited about it.
Early press is good. We're not part of the early press, so we don't know. But
we are not.
We'll read it
we do
along
not have
with
the
you.
privilege, yeah.
I feel like you might have some problems on your hands, Rob, because I heard some rumblings from your players that adventurers and goblins are putting aside their differences and organizing. Perhaps
they have begun to organize. They decided to when encountering bad guys, they love to talk to them, and so every time they talk to them, they present them with the option of joining the union. And this is a union
Rob,
tactic.
Is there a fantasy equivalent of the Pinkertons?
I'm so glad you asked, Matt, because so far nothing bad has happened. But they, their union is starting to get some attention, and they may run into some people who are not too fond of the idea of goblins and smugglers and ne'er-do-wells organizing. There's a couple of problems with their union. One is that it's not clear what it's a union of. They don't have any work for anybody. They're just like,
right. You need a common experience
right.
of shared labor.
I don't know. I don't know why no one ever considered this union organizing.
Have they seen like a mysterious scroll with an eye and something the mysterious phrase "We never sleep"?
Not yet, because they haven't been back to town in a while, and so they may find some things waiting for them. But they bribe people to join the union.
Like such a ripe historical thing for a villain. Their motto is "We never sleep,"
and they've got an eye
than that.
I can't believe we didn't talk about the Pinkertons when we were talking about Call of Cthulhu. They fit perfectly into a Call of Cthulhu game. They bribe people to join the union. They're like, "Here's a silver piece to join the union," which I think is gray area. But anyway,
yeah, I mean the NLRB might have some quibbles with that, but I don't know in Greyhawk if there's
the Greyhawk. There's no as far as I know, there's no laws either way.
I feel like the Circle of Eight would not approve.
They would certainly not. Anyway, I'm excited to see how that pans out. They're having a good time. Here's the thing: if your players want to talk and they roll well and they make a good argument, let them talk. And this is the thing that keeps happening. They rolled astonishingly well. They disguised themselves as a bugbear, or one of them did, and then they just started talking to the goblins, and they made some very compelling arguments with some very good persuasion rolls. So now they've got some goblin lackey union members.
That's great. They're not followers. They're comrades.
That's what they're comrades
in arms. Speaking of shenanigans going on in the game, Rob, we just had to share this with our listeners.
Yeah,
this is oh man, this is a story. This is from Reddit r/legal advice. The funniest Reddit,
one of the best
ever,
Reddits, and yeah. I came across this and I had to share with Matt. Oh, and our
special Dragon Law
retainer,
correspondent, Brent took a look at this with us.
So this is from USA, California, and the author Starsum 75.
Wait, we don't want to out them on Twitter. On our listeners'
it's publicly. It's on. Okay, all right, on legal advice. It's not a person's name. It's just their username. Sorry.
I guess they don't come off very badly here, so we could.
Anyway, never mind. It's not important. Sure. The title is "Former Friend Threatening Legal Action Over Dungeons and Dragons Game." I have been playing Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, with a group of friends for a few years now. A brief overview of the game. D&D is a tabletop role-playing game in which each player creates blah, blah, blah. Anyway, ignore this. It describes to the legal subreddit how it works. I am a PC, while one of my friends was the DM and created a world, NPCs, and a story to play through. A few months ago, the group decided, due to various personal conflicts, that we didn't want the DM to continue in his role and essentially ousted him from the group via text.
Well done. Overthrow your DM if they suck.
No gods, no masters, no dungeon masters. I believe that we were polite but firm and that we no longer wanted to be a part of the group. Instead, I took up the role of DM using the world, lore, and NPCs, as well as notes the former DM shared with us months before he was removed. I essentially continued the story he started using the NPCs in the world as a base. We have been playing that way for a few months, and I want to make it clear that, to the best of my knowledge, no one has made any money from this. It's just a game among friends. The problem is that I received a rather official-looking letter from the former DM telling me to cease and desist from using any material he created.
Beautiful.
Because we were infringing on his intellectual property. He said that, quote, "If I continue to use his property, the former DM will have no choice but to take legal action and to seek out any and all available remedies to resolve the damages." The question to the legal advice subreddit is, does the former DM have anything against me? Could I be sued for copyright infringement? Thank you for your help.
I think if this is so great. I think if this person could be sued, I think we're all up for millions of dollars of IP violations. Every dungeon master,
dungeon master could be taken for all they're worth. So
every friend who sits down and has a conversation, who could win in a fight, the Hulk or Thor? Yeah. Disney is taking them to court.
That's right,
because that's not their legal property.
So there's a couple of things that there are a couple of things that are wrong here, and we consulted with our legal experts. So the short answer is no, obviously not.
Yes. Yeah. And second, we can absolutely now confirm that this person was right, that this DM had to go. Right?
Yes. Right.
If they're going to threaten legal action, yeah.
But like, one, nobody has made any money Obviously, you can't be sued. 2, you can't sue for copyright infringement if you haven't copyrighted it. And I feel like that this guy would have mentioned that this was his copyright if he had gotten like legal rights to his own campaign setting. I like this falls apart upon like even the barest investigation.
Yeah, total according to Brent 100% total bullshit. So
there was one
feel free to steal from your previous campaigns
Yes.
and run them for other people.
Now,
it's completely legal.
there is a question, like not in this situation. Clearly, clearly, everything here is correct. It may be like ethically dubious to like steal or borrow somebody's campaign setting without asking and like use
Not
their.
if they're an asshole,
But
and you
not
have
if they're
to
an
kick
asshole.
them out of your group.
And also, there's like nothing legally wrong with it. It just might not be nice. One of the responses here I really liked is he failed his legal skill check, or you succeeded your saving throw against utter bullshit, whichever metaphor you prefer. Don't talk to him about this. Ignore him. If you receive a geas of summoning, a subpoena, then you have to acknowledge it. But frankly, any attorney would be mad to represent him, madder than a sober dwarf caught in Otto's irresistible dance. Anyway,
Beautiful. Shout out to whatever random lawyer on our legal advice who's actually played
subreddit. No lawyer would ever like. Yeah, no. A judge would throw this out. A lawyer would never. Yeah, this is hilarious and also entirely spurious. So, yeah, if. That's all I can. Yeah,
I'm just happy it happened, and I mean, it's sad we'll never get this actual lawsuit where this person gets completely owned in court for trying to sue their friends for continuing to have fun without them after they were no good.
Terrible.
Let that be a word of warning to all the dungeon masters like us out there. Players
You
don't
can be
need
removed.
you. They
That's
can,
right.
They can
Players
remove you.
don't-
Be nice to your players.
Players don't need you. A few other interesting things happened. There was a report. What was this? Was this an earnings call? I don't remember. Hasbro issued some numbers about Wizards of the Coast, which they had not.
Yeah.
I think this is the first. Is this correct, Matt? The first time they've broken out Dungeons and Dragons profits like separate from. No, that's not true. Never mind. Ignore me.
No. Yeah.
Anyway, it was a good year for WotC, is what it turns out. Almost a $1 billion in revenue. By the way, as we have said
WotC
a million times,
and MTG, right?
Right.
Both had a huge increase in earning. The rest of Hasbro. Obviously not doing super well during a pandemic. Hard for people to go buy Don't Wake Daddy or whatever.
Nobody's buying Monopoly for some reason.
Yeah.
Hasbro as a whole was down 8%, but Wizards, but D&D and MTG were up a lot.
And Wizards got a new logo and announced that they're doing some crossovers with Warhammer 40K, right?
Yeah, that's right. So
I had to basically mute the words MTG and 40K on Twitter because I just can't even think about this. I don't want to think about this.
So here's the thing. So they're clearly like pivoting. The new Wizards of the Coast logo looks like some Fortnite bullshit, or like a Pixar logo. I hate it.
Yeah,
and
we've got to be grumpy about it. It's our brand.
This is our.
It doesn't fucking matter, but yeah,
it matters zero.
It does look like bullshit.
It's 0% to anybody. But there's two new video game projects in the works, which is fine. I love myself a D&D video game. But it, and they're also like, they're doing a bunch of like crossovers and, I
think the biggest news for us is there was some just sort of rumblings about increasing the cadence of releases, which, we talked about this plenty, but 5th edition has a pretty slow release schedule in material. So maybe we'll get more books per year.
Yeah, right. Games Workshop and Middle-earth Enterprises, which owns the rights to Tolkien's work, have entered into creative partnerships with Hasbro. which I guess includes, among other things, a Lord of the Rings expansion for Magic. We don't
really need this. We already played the Decipher Lord of the Rings game.
Bring back the Decipher
till we
TCG. I liked that.
Till we couldn't play it anymore. We played that.
I literally played
together.
it until they discontinued it. Rest in peace. Rest in peace, my beautiful dwarf deck. I miss it so much. I don't want this. I don't want any of this. I don't want like an expanded Magic the Gathering universe. This is not what I'm looking for in my games, but I don't get a say.
But you know what I do want? I mean, the good news is I will take more 5th edition books.
I will take more 5th edition books.
Especially if it means we get more interesting authors coming in to write modules and campaign settings. Like, hell yeah, let's go for it.
Well, and hopefully this will have a downstream effect of making, maybe this will mean that finally some non-D&D games and settings will have a chance to thrive. Like, what's good for D&D is technically good for tabletop role-playing as a whole. So, if there's more money in the environment, yes, most of it's going to keep going to WotC, but some of it will go somewhere else. So this is generally a good thing. No, I don't really want to see Drizzt doing the floss dance in Fortnite, but if that's what it takes to get people on board, then I'll suck it up.
Let's have our fingers crossed there's no Drizzt door Fortnite skin. Jesus Christ. Also, speaking of WotC, WotC put out, we got this month's Unearthed Arcana.
That's right.
Of the Feywild. 4 new character species options: Fairy, Hobgoblin of the Feywild, Owlfolk, and Rabbitfolk. Now you can finally play a rabbit just like Rabbit from Winnie the Pooh. Just a nervous bachelor.
Or the rabbit cop from Zootopia. Whichever one.
The hot rabbit.
Hot rabbit cop from Zootopia. Also, with an Owlfolk, you can now have a whole bird adventuring party. And
that's right. Kinku, Aarakocra,
and Owlfolk. You could have a three-person party, and with 3 different types of birdfolk if you wanted to. You could have a whole bird campaign.
I mean, these all seem more or less fine. There were a couple that a lot of flying at early level, which you know what I'm mostly okay with. If your dungeon master is okay with it. People always want to be fairies, right? I mean, God, I remember having like a 3rd edition campaign. Like, in order to be like a sprite or something, you had to take a level adjustment of +5 and completely screw your character. And players still wanted to do it because people love being fairies. So I'm glad people can be fairies.
People love being fairies. People love to fly. Yeah, flying is a nuisance, but yeah, it's fine. I've got an Aarakocra monk in my Sunless Citadel campaign, and she definitely was like, I'm gonna fly. I'm like, oh crap, I forgot you could do that. And it's fine. You figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes some things that are challenges not challenges, and provides new ones. I liked all the races except for the rabbit folk, which basically requires you to roll a d12 every turn, because I'm not sure why you wouldn't do this most of the time, which is just a lot more rolling. I feel like that's poor design, but everything else here seems pretty fun. I love it.
Yeah, the rabbit hop is I would be shocked if the rabbit hop makes it into any final version of anything, but yeah, these all look great. I mean, they're getting very good at balancing new races, and frankly, they've been pretty good at coming up with new and interesting ideas that aren't too broken. So I got to give them credit here. These are interesting. These are balanced. Ish.
We'll see. The Hobgoblin is interesting. It's basically a warlord species, right?
I noticed that. Yeah,
bunch of you can be a mastermind rogue or a commander battle master, really a warlord just from your species.
You get benefits
a limited
to your
times
help.
per day.
Yeah, you get benefits to your
which
help,
is great.
Action, which is pretty cool.
It's like, oh, you can't, you don't want to be a bard, or you can't be a bard or a warlord-ish fighter. Well, you can take this species. That's fine.
I mean, the Hobgoblin would pair very nicely with our warlord class, which we are nearing a final version of.
Yeah, it's actually art is coming along, and we might have a final thing. Though it's questionable how well it will pair, because many things don't stack, right? It's like,
right.
You do this as a bonus action. Well, your warlord class already gets this with a bonus action. So maybe it, in fact, pairs terribly.
Well, the fortune of the many, I like that.
Oh,
and
the
frankly,
fortune of the many would work.
Which is this cool hobgoblin ability, which is if you miss or fail an ability check, you can add a bonus up to the number of allies you can see, which is a pretty cool ability. I also like, Matt, they've been doing this more often, but I like that now you can use things a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. I don't remember when they first started using that as a resource, but I like it. I think it's well balanced, and I'm a big fan.
It came out in official material with Tasha's.
That's right. That's
but it had been Unearthed Arcana for the last year and a half or so.
Yeah, but they've been using it more often, and I as I'm tinkering with it, it seems pretty balanced. I like. Yeah. It's better.
We've
talked
used
about
it
this
in our warlord class.
We've talked about this a bunch, but tired of giving people additional pools of resources to deal with. But this is a good solution. Anyway,
easy to keep track of, and scales with multi-classing.
It does. Good. Unearthed Arcana, very neat. Yeah.
So let's get to some letters, but first, Rob, I had one more funny thing to share with you.
Okay.
We love Cyberpunk Red. And so I found a question from a dungeon master or a game master of Cyberpunk Red that I think it's just you know what, Cyberpunk Red, if we look at this at the bright side, it's slowly radicalizing people. Here's the question, Rob. What separates a small corporation from a gang? Someone on the internet writes. Both are ruthless, sketchy, and stick to a dress code of sorts. What really separates the two, logistically speaking? What stops people from referring to small businesses as gangs and vice versa?
That's a great question. What is the difference?
It's almost like this is the point of Cyberpunk. There isn't much difference.
It's exactly
gangs just don't have the legal backing, which doesn't really matter anymore in the world of Cyberpunk.
Look up Monopoly on Violence and read up about it.
The difference is a legal fiction that in the far future dystopia that we live in won't matter.
That's right. All right, so letters. What have we got?
Thanks, everyone. Keep sending us your Dungeon Master questions, suggestions, ideas, and criticisms. Here's our first letter, Rob.
This one's from Greg. This is an easy... Greg, thank you for your very concise and letter. Greg writes, I have 2 questions. Could you explain Thaco and how it works? I'm trying to learn the original system. 2, can you explain how damage works in Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition? Thanks for being awesome. You're welcome, Greg. Greg, these are great questions. So, first... Thaco.
You take the Thaco, I'll take the Mutants and Masterminds.
Okay. So, fair warning, Greg, I appreciate that you are trying to do your homework and learn. You don't need to know this. It's a waste of your time. Nobody should listen to this, but I will explain to you how Thaco works.
There could be a small use case for it in that you can better translate old stat blocks.
Maybe. That's a good point. You would want to know this if you were trying to adapt a 2nd edition adventure. So, it's also not that complicated. It's just very silly. So Thaco stands for 2-hit armor class 0. And that is exactly what it sounds like. And
the big picture is you're just doing the math before you roll.
Yes.
Right? Think of it that way. This is the purpose of this, is you don't have to add a number to your die.
So instead of adding a number exactly right, you know what you need to hit. So if your Thaco is 10 and you're attacking something with an armor class of 0, you need to roll a 10 or lower to hit. 10 or higher to hit. Sorry.
Yes, 10 or higher.
Sorry. I confused myself. The thing is, it's not actually very confusing. It's just, the math is quite simple. It's just very counterintuitive. So,
it's just you're giving your players a target number.
Exactly.
So they know exactly what the percentage to hit chance is. So in this example, target number's 10. They know they have a 55% chance to hit.
Exactly.
If your Thaco was 20 and the creature had an armor class 8, then your target number is 12.
Right.
It gets complicated if the creature has a negative AC because you're subtracting.
If you got a Thaco of 10 and you roll a 12, the best you can hit is a -2, right? And if you've got a Thaco of 8 and you roll, 14, then you get a -6. It does make sense once you fix it in your head. But it's just so, I don't know if this is true. To me, it's counterintuitive, but as I've just described, it actually kind of makes sense because my players.
It makes sense once you've used it one session.
My players just don't love like adding together, even though in 5th edition you only have to add 2 numbers. You just have to add proficiency in your ability score. It's still sometimes they don't love that. So maybe it is better. I mean, in other systems, having a target number is great. 2-hit armor class 0. While this is a holdover from the chainmail days. Like this is an old. No, that's not
this
true.
is 2nd edition, right? Sorry,
yeah,
that goes 2nd edition. Not,
in
edition.
In a broad sense, it's more of like a wargaming conception than a TTRPG, which tends to be more straightforward.
The only thing that I think is really complicated for me is creatures with a high or basically a strong armor class, right, have an AC of a negative number, right? And since you're taking your Thaco and you subtract the creature's AC to find your target number, if you're subtracting a negative number, as every 7th grader should be able to tell you, right, you're actually adding that number. So if your Thaco is 20 and the creature has a -2 AC, then your target number is a 22, which means you can't hit this creature.
Right. Again, once you've done it a few times, it's actually very quick and it makes sense. But it's also easy to overthink it, which is what I think I have done 3 times while just talking about this. But yeah.
Yep. And second question, how do you calculate damage in Mutants and Masterminds? This is actually useful for, I think, anyone who actually plays Dungeons & Dragons and doesn't like the damage system in Dungeons & Dragons, because Mutants and Masterminds is a D20 system, just with a different damage calculation system. You only ever need a D20. You don't have to roll 2d6 for your greatsword damage. You make a damage saving throw is essentially what happens when you get successfully hit by attack, right? And damage saving throw is like a Constitution saving throw, but a little bit different and special. The base DC for that is always a 15 plus the creature's damage bonus. So a small hit will be a DC 15. A large hit might be something like a DC 20 or a DC 22, right? If the creature has a huge damage bonus. If you pass the check, you basically soak the damage. You take no damage, right? So it allows you to play a character that is not very nimble and good at dodging things, but can just soak things. Perfect for a superhero type game, right? You're a big tank or a brick house. If you fail the roll, Mutants and Masterminds has a concept called degrees of success, which you can fail it by somewhere between 1 and 5, or more than 5, or more than 10, more than 15, right? Increments like that. There are increasing penalties. If you just fail it by 5, you take a -1 to further damage saves, and then there's sort of some additive things. Like if you fail it by 10, you're basically the equivalent of stunned for a round where you can only move and you can't take actions. If you fail it by a bunch, right, you can be taken out of the fight.
I mean,
that's it.
I think we've said a bunch of times that we don't love the D&D 5th edition or any edition damage system. It is simple, but it's not a very it's not a great way to model combat or damage, and there are other ways to do it. You just have to get your players on board and get used to it. Thanks for your questions, Greg. We love mechanical questions. They're easy to answer. They're wrong, things we can describe. If you want to know anything about any dumb part of mechanical minutia, we're grognards and we will answer your question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. Here's our next letter from Travis. Hey guys, your podcast is fantastic. Big fan, and thank you for keeping me company on many a car trip. I am a DM of color, and I'm about to teach some March break intro to D&D camps for kids.
That's awesome.
It's super great. In my own headcanon, lots of my NPCs are people of color. My question is, how does one find the balance of introducing an NPC as a person of color without putting so much attention on it that becomes its own thing, but still promotes diversity? For my adult games, I run, my current strategy has been just not to describe ethnicity at all and let my players decide for themselves. But for kids, I want to let them know this is a diverse universe where the default setting isn't blonde Europeans. Again, big fan. Keep rolling them dice. Travis.
Travis, this is a great question. And I think that you're right to want to put description in there, because as the greatest example of this is the Wizard of Earthsea, where if you don't explicitly, in the West, if you don't explicitly talk about a person's skin color, people default to thinking that they are white. And Ursula Le Guin has had to repeatedly remind people that Sparrowhawk was not a white person. And so it is good if you want to like emphasize to your players that not everybody is a blonde, blue-eyed, Aryan knight. And I will include a link, but I have a resource that I've drawn upon for both my writing and for my descriptions, called it's a Tumblr called Writing with Color.
Writing with Color. And
there's a bunch of like really great images and descriptions describing skin tone, things that different shades of brown and black, and words like ochre and umber, sepia, russet. There's lots of good words that you can use to describe skin color without just saying this is a black person, this is a brown person,
right. Or without saying skin color, like talking about complexion, hue,
exactly.
Or tone,
you can say they're
right?
Yeah.
This is especially helpful, right, if you're running a fantasy game that is divorced from the social and historical constructions of race and ethnicity in our world, right?
Precisely.
But you want to still indicate it's a diverse universe.
And a tremendous author for this is, of course, N.K. Jemisin in her Broken Earth series, where everybody is a black person or a black or brown person, and she is very good at describing skin tones, and it's very clear these are not white people, except for the evil, scary white people from the Arctics. But she has a lot of like really great descriptions of skin color. So if you're interested in seeing this in action, I would pick up those. We'll include a link to Writing with Color.
I want a second Writing with Color. It's just a huge like tool in your toolbox for synonyms for all of these descriptors. And I think I would add one thing to do is, describe all your NPCs, right? So sort of do this for every creature and monster, right? And then it becomes a normalized thing, right? Quick, punchy descriptions for your players.
Great question, Travis. And let us know how those D&D camps go. It sounds awesome. It sounds very, very cool.
Thanks, Travis.
All right, our next letter is from Colin. Hi, guys. I'm currently DMing my first campaign as a DM. We started during COVID lockdown, so we've been using a mix of Zoom and Roll20 to play. It's been going fine so far. It's my first time playing any kind of TTRPG online, but it's always been one of my intentions to eventually move our game offline and back into person whenever it feels safe to do that again, and all my players are comfortable with it. About half of my players are people I've played with in person as a player before, and I'm confident they'll transition to offline easily. The other half, though, are friends I invited to play who have never played before, and so far this online version of the game is all they know of D&D. I'm worried that the transition will be difficult for players who have only ever played in a way where their character sheets, dice rolls, etc. are all built into an online system. I worry there are aspects of characters they've never had to really think about, adding modifiers, etc., because Roll20 has done that work for them. Do you have advice on how to go about cutting the cord and make a smooth transition to IRL play, especially for players who so far have never filled out a character sheet by hand or rolled a set of physical dice? I hope I'm just overthinking this and being a worrywart, but any tips would be greatly appreciated. Colin.
Ooh.
Colin, this is a good question.
Something I have thought about a lot because all the people I've played online with, I've also played in person, and I can see why this would be a concern, right?
I have thought about this.
This is interesting. Okay.
Because I have a mix of people, and some people, I think everybody I run games for, I have played with a little bit in person, but some of them I've now been playing online with longer than we ever played together. And so, Colin, I do think your players will probably be fine. But it's not wrong for you to worry. So two things that I would do if I were you is I would make sure to talk with your players about this. Say, hey, I know you said that this was your intention, but say, hey, this is it's gonna look like. Here are my concerns. Two things that you're specifically worried about, and Matt and I have differing opinions on this, but if your players like or need to have things calculated for them, which is not a problem, they can bring a phone or a tablet or even a laptop if they promise to behave in person. But like that's totally fine. I've had plenty of games.
Supposedly the Roll20 app is, by the time it's safe to come back, should be out, so they can have their character sheets on a tablet, right? They also use D&D Beyond or something like that.
And there are a ton of like third-party apps that will do all those calculations for you. I like those. I also like to have a physical character sheet. So that's an option if you're worried about that. There is, of course, like the social aspect, right? These people haven't all played together necessarily. But as long as you foreground that and say, hey, maybe things are going to be a little bit weird. Things will be weird for everybody, by the way. We've all been locked inside for a year, so this is probably going to be a little bit fraught no matter what happens. So just prepare yourself for that.
Yeah. And then I would say really the easiest way to make a transition smooth is lean into the positive aspects. There's nothing more fun and joyful than rolling physical dice.
Bring snacks.
Bring snacks. Listen, nothing on Roll20 and having everything calculated is as fun as actually grabbing some real cubes in your hand and throwing them down on the table. It's fun. Many of my characters are going to love that.
Still roll physical dice even on Roll20, and I trust them to tell me what the rolls are, and I miss rolling dice. I'm excited to start running games in person. This is totally normal, Colin. I have the inverse problem.
Feels so good. Sorry,
I have a couple players who they're like, I can't do online anymore, and they're waiting for me to for things to be safe so we can play in person again. But the thing is, you may lose a player or two, but here's the thing. You did your due diligence. You told everybody that you were planning to go back to in-person games. It would suck if people felt like they couldn't play, but you're giving them every opportunity to join in and be a part of it. So just do your best, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, lean into the joyful part and bring some aids, or let them use some aids if they're worried about it. And be prepared for a little bit of learning of actually having to do some basic math at the table, which is tricky the first couple times you do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Colin. Here's our next letter. Hi, Matt and Rob. Thank you for being such inspiring DMs. I recently received some feedback from one of my players that there is not enough tension in my sessions. It was mentioned that I root for the players too much and should allow room for failure. I'm having trouble planning for players to fail or prepping combats that they could lose. I was wondering if you had any suggestions of how to build more tension in a campaign without it turning into a DM versus players sort of game. Any ideas are appreciated. I want to get better at this in my games. Keep rolling those dice, Jen.
Jen, this is an interesting question. If one of my players said this to me, I'd tell them to fuck off. But you're
Rob wouldn't really.
I wouldn't really. But like, it's just such a weird complaint to me. I mean, your players are allowed to say, "Hey, I want more of this type of thing," or I want. I'm looking for this in a campaign, but like this seems like a weird complaint to me, I'm confused because it seems like maybe what they're saying is that they want the campaign to be harder, because that's not the same thing as tension, right? Like I don't know that tension to me comes from combat or like the threat of combat necessarily. If your players are like stomping every encounter you throw at them, then that's one thing, but I'm not sure. I mean, I can tell you like practically there's some really, I think this is probably the easiest thing in the world to solve, frankly. You just put harder enemies and more traps and things like that into your campaign, but that doesn't really sound like what your players want.
For me, tension usually comes from the difficult choices or very clearly showing players that there are some, while rooting for them and, being on their side. I think you're right to do that. Sounds like that might be what you enjoy, if that's what you're already doing. But since you, asked, right, if you want to get better at this, I think without sort of sacrificing your core sort of idea of what it is to be a DM and making it, without turning it, as you said, into a player versus DM game, right? Presenting your players frequently with tough choices and with actions that they're allowed to do that come with known risks, right? You can pick up this artifact. It has a curse. It is very powerful, though. There's only so much time, right? Are the players going to intercept the villain who is escaping in their longship, or are they going to go to the wizard's college, right, to warn them about the imminent planar rift? What's the choice of what they're going to do, right?
Are they going to rescue their beloved NPC, or are they going to pursue the villain, right? Or are they going to forge deeper to get the powerful artifact, or are they going to return home to warn the village of an impending raid? We've talked about this a few times before, but there's tension and reward outside of just combat, and I'm sure that you know this, but and that I think is what makes a campaign interesting and what provides a lot of stakes and gets players invested is demonstrating or talking about how that there are, hard choices, like Matt said. And that's how I would approach this. You can also just make combats a little bit more challenging, and extra baddies or, Actually, I would not add hit points. That's the one thing you probably don't need to do. But, crank up their damage a bit. I don't know. This is...
Add more enemies.
Yeah.
The other thing is okay, right, you want more tension or the player wants room for failure. You're playing, hopefully, if your players trust you and they feel comfortable enough coming to you with things they would like to see done differently, that seems like you're in a pretty good place. So... plan out in your next arc or two of your sessions a very clear set of things that players have to accomplish in order not to fail at one specific thing, and see how they like it, right? It's like, there's a complicated thing they have to do to stop the plague of lycanthropy in the city. They have to collect this cure, research this thing, kill the head lycanthrope all before the next full moon. See if they can do it, and with that really imminent threat of failure, and they may enjoy it, and maybe you enjoy it, and maybe they don't, right? Finding that level of how difficult it is to succeed at some of the bigger things in your campaign can be tough.
Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful. It depends on what your player means by tension, but that's how I would approach it. And I think it's good that you want to improve and that you're taking the suggestion to heart, and I hope this helps.
Yeah, thanks for the letter, Jen.
Here's a letter from Carolyn. Carolyn writes, "Hey there, I'm starting to wrap up Dragon of Icespire Peak as a first-time DM with mostly new players. They're going to want to keep their characters, and I'm wondering what to run next. Any suggestions for 5th+ level campaigns? Ideally something written by BIPOC, LGBTQ+ writers, so I can spend some money on someone not from Wizards of the Coast." Matt, you have suggestions here?
Yeah, thanks for this interesting and great question, Carolyn. So here's the deal, right, is that official D&D and even third-party supplements are largely a space dominated by people not in those groups. However, there are some great published adventures by LGBTQ+ writers and by BIPOC writers. However, it's just, you really do have to work to find some of them. Let's see. What do I want to recommend first? So I think first I would recommend, just because I don't know what sort of style your personal campaign is, right? After this Dragon of Icespire Peak, right? Intro adventure. There's so many different ways you can take it. So I want to recommend a couple anthologies that you can really look and see what your jam is. All of them have people from those groups as authors. So first, I would recommend the Uncaged anthologies. There are currently 4 volumes of these. Second, one we've reviewed on the show before, the Eyes Unclouded anthology, and of course, volume 1 of Eat the Rich. So some third-party anthologies are, I think, a good way to start, especially if you're not ready to commit to another 10-level campaign. One of my favorite published modules that isn't by an LGBTQ plus author that I think is just, I've run it before. I think it absolutely kicks ass and actually relates to what we were talking about earlier with Mutants and Masterminds, because this author is the main author of Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition, which is a great book, and that's Crystal Frasier's The Harrowing. Now, The Harrowing is a module for Pathfinder that you would have to convert to 5th edition, and it's slightly higher than 5th level, but it can easily be toned down, and it's a great fantasy adventure that centers around the Paizo version of the Deck of Many Things / tarot deck, the Harrowing deck, and it is super fun. You can print these cards out. The adventure is incredibly well written. It's one of the, I think, other than their like adventure pass, right? Pathfinder's put out a lot of short modules. I think it's like easily their best, or at least top 3 short module, The Harrowing by Crystal Frasier.
This is a great suggestion, Matt. Actually, I had forgotten about that. I've been wanting to run this forever, so that's a strong suggestion. And
it's one of those that you can really kind of plop down anywhere, because it's very much a some people who do fantasy tarot readings have arrived, and players, love this shit. So let's see, what else did I have another thing pulled up? Let me tab over to the Guild. We had talked about this author before when we were talking about some of the deep lore of Netheril, when we're talking about Icewind Dale.
Oh, that's right.
And I want to bring up Jennell Jaquays, or Jaquays. I'm not sure how to say her last name, but she has written some of the really great old school adventures. The Talons of Night, I think, is a really, really great one that I have not run, but I have read, and I really like that. So I would suggest that, The Talons of Night by Jennell Jaquays.
That's right. This is the one that I was thinking of. These will probably require some adaptation, but...
Right. Again, this is a 2nd edition module. 2nd
edition. But Jennell is a trans woman, and these are old school but very, very cool adventures. Talons of Night is Egyptian themed. So you'll have to do a little bit of legwork here, but sounds like you potentially want to do that to avoid giving money to WotC, which I respect and understand. So hopefully one of these is useful to you, and we periodically get suggestions from listeners. So if we get any other updates on writers and creators of color or who are LGBTQ, we'll be sure to give them a shout out. Yeah.
And we're not experts on this, but I think one of the big takeaways when thinking about and researching this question is, and it's sort of something I think we all know a little bit, but sort of taking stock of this, is that a lot of BIPOC and LGBTQ plus authors are often working in systems that are not D&D, either third party or officially for Wizards of the Coast. So, when you're doing your own research, right, you're going to find their own systems and own campaign settings and own modules that are not part of 5th edition D&D.
And we've talked about this a bunch, and there's options there. You can, if you don't want to do a system shift, if your players like D&D, if you like D&D, which is totally fine, you can do an adaptation yourself, but maybe you do want to transition to something else, something like Cyberpunk Red, or to any number of Powered by the Apocalypse type games. It depends on, I find myself, even though I like D&D, often thinking about this because I'm frankly looking for different stories, different types of stories and different ways of telling them. And I'm finding increasingly that D&D is restricting in this way. So just something to consider.
Yeah, I was looking for new sort of campaign settings and stuff like that. I found one that I getting into. I think it's super interesting, and it's Mythic D6 Bastion by Capira Publishing, sort of an Afro fantasy epic campaign setting, which looks super cool, and I hope maybe we can review on the show one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the letter, Carolyn. Let us know if any of those adventures or suggestions fit with your style and your players.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you all for listening. As always, please, if you have questions, I know that we do not answer every email, and we're very sorry about it. We're trying to get better. Hashtag do better us. But please write to us if you have questions. We'll do our very best to answer them.
We'll see you very soon with the Candlekeep mystery review.
We'll be reviewing Candlekeep Mysteries. We're very excited about it. Look forward to that.
Even a special guest coming up.
Ooh, that's right.
So no spoilers.
Big things coming in the next few weeks. So hold on to your hats, get vaccinated, and keep rolling them dice.